When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes? Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm Oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm Oldish. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Oldish, Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Janet. How are you today?
I'm okay. We were just talking about what we want to talk about, and it seems like one of the issues, one of the topics, one of the themes going on in our country today is the First Amendment. What is going on with the First Amendment? How was it being treated? And also then the First Amendment as it relates to being oldish. So I thought I'd read what this says about the First Amendment and start there. The First Amendment guarantees that the government cannot interfere with 5 fundamental rights: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom for the right to assemble peacefully, and freedom for the right to petition the government. And it ensures people can freely practice their beliefs, express their ideas, gather in groups, and appeal to the government for help with grievances, protecting core aspects of individual liberty and democracy.
That sounds great.
That does sound great. Does it sound like anything that's going on right now?
No, there's a lot of effort out there to suppress it. But before we get too far into that, you just read that from something. What were you reading it from?
It's actually from Google. So it was an AI overview, but just typing in what is the First Amendment.
Okay, so it's an AI overview.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. So it's not like Wikipedia where somebody might have edited something funky in that. That's actually what I remember from civics class way back when. Maybe it's the First Amendment should be amended to require people take a civics class.
I was just going to ask, I wonder if any kids are growing up with civics classes these days. I suppose if they're growing up with the history of racism being erased and books being banned, I think there's probably a good chance there aren't civics classes at the moment.
Yeah, my grandchildren are all in school, and none of them are reporting civics classes. When I asked them the dread question, how was school today? None of them have said, we're talking about the First Amendment in civics class. Okay. That's a pretty good sample. It's 5 people.
Yes.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the First Amendment today is that I think the First Amendment has taken some pretty tough hits lately. And I have some fairly strong opinions on that, which I get to express because of the First Amendment.
Exactly. The freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. And in theory, what we're doing is kind of like the press, although certainly not anticipated by the founders, would be 2 people who are hundreds of miles apart talking to each other via some magic and recording it, and then that being listened to by hundreds of people all over the world via some magic. But other than that, I think a podcast would qualify as the press.
Okay.
So we got a couple of those covered, and we are the freedom of association. We're associating with each other, so that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. There are some cultures where unrelated males and females don't get to associate with each other. But we don't live there. We live in a country that's based on you get to be as free as you need to be, and as free, well, not as free as you need to be, but you get to be fairly free as long as you don't start infringing on other people.
At least it used to be.
Well, yeah, it did used to be.
It makes me
Oh.
think, do you remember when our kids were young and Marlo Thomas made the recording Free to Be You and Me?
Yes.
At that time, I think we believed those things and saw these things to be happening for the most part, but not with all factions of our society.
Yeah, it was different then. So one of the things that brings it up in terms of why do I want to talk about this now? Why is this timely now? Is we just saw a very strange First Amendment scenario play out where someone who was very outspoken and frequently, in the impression that I get, frequently in his speeches and podcasts, and I'm talking at the moment about Charlie Kirk, frequently in his podcasts quacked about the First Amendment and how the government was going to try to shut him down, although I'm not aware of any evidence that ever actually happened. But it was all about, oh, yeah, I get to say whatever I want to say, First Amendment rights and First Amendment rights and First Amendment rights. And when he sadly was assassinated, and we're using the term, I just said the word assassinated, but assassination implies political motivation. And it's not clear yet that that's what happened.
He definitely was murdered, along with a number of other politicians in recent times. I find it so fascinating that our president decided to elevate Charlie Kirk's murder into a national time of mourning, which is appropriate in the sense of we all need to reconsider what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be respectful, which is the First Amendment? But why is it Charlie Kirk that's getting laid in state and flags at half-mast when that wasn't what happened for the other recent killings of politicians? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't get that myself. So Charlie Kirk talked a lot about the First Amendment and how what he had to say was protected by the First Amendment, and you can't let them cancel you or so on. He went on and on about that. And this week, Jimmy Kimmel was fired, or his show was suspended for criticizing the president and saying less than worshipful things about Charlie. So Charlie Kirk was murdered, and he had said some things that could be interpreted as not positive.
That is an understatement. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. And so Jimmy Kimmel wasn't sufficiently respectful of Charlie Kirk or the president, and he had his show suspended.
I just want to say suspended indefinitely, so we can guess it probably fired, but go ahead.
Yes, because of pressure from the government. It happened right after the head of the FCC was in touch with the Walt Disney Corporation to complain about what was there. So government pressure. Now, the First Amendment says the Congress shall pass no law, which I always interpreted as the government can't shut you up. But the Congress seems to have abdicated here about this as well as a bunch of other things. And so they're letting the executive branch do things that, in my opinion, the Constitution doesn't say the executive branch can do. So for the executive branch to put pressure on a broadcaster or a large broadcasting company to control the speech of one of their employees on one of their shows, that seems to me to be verging on a First Amendment violation. Mm-hmm. It may not technically. I mean, if you went to the Supreme Court, which is a toss-up these days also, but it may not technically be a violation of the First Amendment, but it certainly violates the spirit of the First Amendment. And if somebody at Disney listened to the show and said, oh, I don't like what that guy just said, I'm his boss, I'm going to fire him because I don't want him to say that stuff anymore. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. But to do it under pressure from the executive branch and pressure, was a phone call. I don't know. Maybe it was friendly. It's, hey, Bob, how about you get rid of this guy? There's no pressure there, but that sort of thing.
Well, pressure can be put in nice ways or scary ways.
That's true. That's the old mob boss thing is, hey, it's a nice house you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I wonder if the First Amendment was meant to be a bridge between the fundamental aspects of democracy and the bridge to making sure that we can honor those basic values, and that when those values are under siege, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right to assemble peacefully, the right to petition the government, when any of those are taken away, we're moving that much far away from our fundamental values, which means moving away from democracy.
Yeah, that's certainly the way it feels to me. That's without even getting into the corruption part, which is part B of my particular rant here, because what happened with Stephen Colbert was clearly corrupt, as far as I can tell from what's been reported, with a definite quid pro quo. I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist. There's lots of conspiracy theories running around about the murder or perhaps not murder of Charlie Kirk.
What do you mean, perhaps not murder?
Well, I've seen several stories that said they whisked him out of there and there was not a lot of evidence left at the scene. No cameras took any pictures of him arriving at a hospital or any of that. And so was this a total faked up thing where he wasn't actually killed? And I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
My understanding is that there's someone who was very physically close to Charlie Kirk when he was speaking and was filming it just because they were filming it, not expecting this murder, that many, many people have looked at that, have seen that video online where I guess the bullet just rips through his neck. The chances that he's still alive are doubtful. And if he is still alive, I'm guessing he's not very functional.
But this is America in the 21st century. Yeah. And so there's a question, what if the whole thing was staged? And there was somebody who said that he took that video. How do we know? So anyway, I don't want to go too far down that particular rabbit hole. But I think what happened with Stephen Colbert was clearly corrupt without having to be in a conspiracy theory. The son of the guy who is now the world's wealthiest man, that's Larry Ellison, and he has a son who used some of his wealth to set up a media company called Skydance. Skydance offered CBS $2 billion purchase. So Skydance was going to buy CBS for $2 billion. The woman who owns or is the major stockholder of CBS, who inherited that from her father, wanted that $2 billion. Donald Trump personally, not the president of the United States, but Donald Trump personally sued CBS. And this is in sequence, right? So Skydance gets bought, makes CBS an offer. Donald Trump sues CBS for, I don't remember what it was, but like a lot of money, millions of dollars, because they aired an interview with Kamala Harris during the election, which Trump claimed to be edited in an unlawful way. And I don't understand that at all. But anyway, that was the gist of the suit. Because of the size of the purchase of CBS by Skydance, and because they used the federally controlled airwaves to broadcast, the executive branch, the FCC, needed to sign off on that purchase. The owner of CBS offered Donald Trump personally, not the president of the United States, but Donald Trump personally, $16 million to settle the suit. Trump accepted it. The merger was approved. Skydance bought CBS. The owner got $2 billion. And then they executed part two of what looks like a quid pro quo, which was they immediately fired Stephen Colbert. They didn't fire him. They ended his contract or said they weren't going to renew his contract or whatever it was. So that looks to me like not only an infringement of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, but it's also blatantly corrupt. Here's $16 million, and we'll fire that guy for you in exchange for you letting this deal go through.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the founders intended that the First Amendment would be a bargaining chip or would be up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's clear that we get to express our opinions no matter what they are, even if they're ugly.
And we get to express our opinions safely. So whether it's Charlie Kirk or Nancy Pelosi's husband or the couple that were politicians that were shot, that we would be safe. And so it makes me think about what this means for oldish people. The fact that our First Amendment rights are in question right now.
Yeah. And just as we were saying before we started talking, just at a time when one of the characteristics of oldishness is being able to speak your mind and not worry about what other people think. As soon as we get to this point, there goes the First Amendment out the window.
Exactly. I feel like when we've lived this long into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we have grown to a place where we have, hopefully, wisdom, experience, opinions, and want to share them and have less holding us back because we're oldish and we're ready to talk and we're ready to say what we think. And now there's this fear. Can I say what I think? Even as you and I are recording this episode, I'm thinking, so theoretically, one or both of us could get arrested for some of the things we're saying right now, which I doubt because it seems pretty mild in a way, but I saw what Jimmy Kimmel said that night. It seemed pretty mild to me. So it's definitely a clash for where we are in our life experience and developmentally that we're ready to say what we think. Even I'm imagining at an airport, if somebody is pulling you over, some kind of security, and it would be, when we were younger, our parents might have said, just be quiet, don't say anything. Let's just get through this so we can go on our vacation or wherever we're going. But now we're oldish. It's like, don't tell me not to say anything. This is not okay.
I'm failing, but I'm trying hard not to believe that what I see as actual assaults on the First Amendment are being conducted by the active government as a way to further divide us, because what they're saying is those people are saying horrible things. We're saying good stuff. They're saying horrible stuff. We should shut them up, which you might do that in the tavern, but the government's not supposed to be doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you made me think of the tavern or the playground. It's kind of like, okay, let's grow up, everybody. Yeah. You remember that book that was like everything we needed to know we learned in kindergarten?
Yeah.
Let's pull that back out. What did we learn in kindergarten? To be respectful, to allow for differences of opinion, to solve things without violence, to collaborate, cooperate.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about some of the other needs that we have as we're aging. We want to feel safe. We want to feel protected. We want to feel some sense of predictability, which is going away as we get older. So we have more of a sense of things are changing. So while things are changing in our own lives personally, I think there might have been some point for people where they're getting older and they could say, well, I know these things are true. I know that my pension isn't going to get cut. I know I have Social Security. I know that, those kinds of things. I know that our political system, though it may disagree, will get through it and we'll continue building our democracy. None of those things seem true or dependable.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely some undependability going on right around now. Well, I wonder if there's any good news in this. And also, I wonder, can I come out of this conversation with what am I going to do about it? What approach can I take to push back against encroachments against the First Amendments? And it's not just the freedom of speech, the freedom of press is in there, freedom of religion. We've seen attempts to suppress religions and shut down protests and so on. So actions that we can take. I think there are some. Get involved locally, politically, because it boils down to that. Sitting around bitching and moaning about it isn't doing me any good.
One of the things we've talked about over time as far as what do we need as we're aging, and we've talked about being productive, being part of a community, feeling seen. And so I definitely feel like some of our work right now some of our opportunities is to build our community, starting with our family, our friends, our community, our town. So whatever that looks like, because I feel like that's where our protection, our strength is going to come from, is that we know we can hunker down with whoever and maybe do things together to protest, but at least that we know each other's names and care about each other, because that all by itself is a weapon against not caring about people, individuals, not being kind. So the opposite is let's be kind to everyone and caring and understanding and patient, because I feel that our whole as a nation, I feel like, but definitely around here in my community and town and New England, that there's a rise in the base level of anxiety, depression, fears. So if someone's acting irrationally, meanly, cutting you off on the road, be able to look at them and think, maybe they're under a lot of pressure right now. Maybe they're losing their job, or they're not able to get a raise, or whatever it might be, that people are stressed. So if we can respond with loving kindness, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always be kind is always the best antidote that I'm aware of, is just be kind. Life is always going to have its challenges. These are some, and it feels like challenging times. I had a conversation with one of my grandsons a couple of weeks ago in which we were talking about how weird the world is right now, or seems to be. And we agreed that it would have really sucked to live in the Roman Empire. Compared to the Roman Empire, it's not that bad now.
That's good to have perspective, right? If we don't know history, we're bound to repeat it. How old is your grandson that we were having that conversation with, just for the audience to know?
13. Yeah. That was a great conversation, because we went into a lot of detail about how can you tell? Well, it's like you haven't been thrown into the Colosseum with the gladiators and the lions and the tigers. Good point. And let's hope it stays that way. But diseases were rampant. The government was crazy and corrupt, and there were slaves and wars going on everywhere, and sexism and racism were the order of the day. And people had to speak Latin.
That's the worst.
That's the worst thing. That Latin is tough.
Yes. And hopefully, as we're thinking about kindness to others, I often, when I think about that era of history and people filling the stadium to cheer when the lion dismembers the person, what kind of humanity was that?
Yes. Pretty strange. Yeah. Well, on that cheerful note, we've been talking almost a half an hour now, and I feel better. It always works. It's like whenever I'm feeling grumpy, maybe I'll do a podcast with Janet, and that'll cheer me up.
Yes. And hopefully we're helping to cheer up all of you who are listening with us. You're always welcome to comment on our website. If you disagree, agree, have things you want us to talk about, sharing your opinion. hopefully this is helping others feel better also.
Yes, we hope so. So be kind, be safe. And if you have to make a choice between one and the other, be kind.
And sometimes be silly and laugh.
Sometimes be silly. Yes. Good. Well, goodbye, Janet.
Goodbye, Greg.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Janet and I believe very strongly that the First Amendment is the key to our cherished American freedoms and must be protected and celebrated at all times, especially now that it is under attack by those who must silence opposition to retain power. Quick update. It looks as though the Disney Corporation has decided to unsuspend Jimmy Kimmel. So the Jimmy Kimmel Show will be back on the air starting, I think I read it somewhere Tuesday. So perhaps other people speaking up has reversed this unfortunate infringement of the First Amendment, and we'll have Jimmy Kimmel back on the air again. And I think that will be a good thing, but we'll see what happens. We have some exciting episodes coming up, including more book clubs and special guests who have a lot to say about being oldish. And don't forget to love everyone. You can leave comments or requests for topics or guests on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. There's a link there, too, if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hallelujah.